Hi, this is Dr. Elizabeth Saunders Medlock with your life coaching tip of the week for the week of June 24th, 2013. I'm back, everyone. I want to do my quick coaching video this week on the process of grieving. I didn't put up a video for the last 2 weeks because I was gone. I lost my maternal grandmother, and it made me think about going through that process of her dying and the funeral and it being just a few weeks ago. The process of grief and the ways that different people grieve. So I want to talk a little bit about that today. I think one of the things that's important to remember about the loss of a loved one, and something that was really glaringly obvious to me as I watched my other family members deal with her death, was that people grieve very, very differently, and that it's okay to have your own way of grieving and to not impose your own way of grieving on other people. People experience loss differently, and that's okay. And people experience loss and grieve at different times. Some people grieve immediately, some people grieve later. But the first thing to remember is not everyone is going to grieve the same. The loss is not going to look the same for that person. But allow yourself to grieve in the ways that you want to grieve. And don't let other people kind of tell you how you should be grieving or what you should be doing. For me, I know that I don't want to see a body in a casket. That's not important to me. And there's other things about the process that just really, aren't very important to me, that are very important to other people. They're not important to me. And I chose to do what I wanted to do, and I chose not to do what I didn't want to do, even though others were doing that. And so you have to give yourself permission to grieve the way you want to. Secondly, I think the important thing to remember is that grieving is a process, and you have to allow yourself to grieve and to grieve over time. A lot of people, if you've read Kubler-Ross's stuff, denial is common. And the problem with denial, which happens to a lot of people, they kind of deny the event has happened, is that it really blocks any type of grieving and healing. So the quicker you get to an acceptance phase, that this has happened, this person is gone off this physical plane, you can begin to really experience grief and embrace the grief, and to be able to let it go. And grieving, as with any loss, it comes in stages. You don't do all your grieving in a week and then you're done. The grieving process is particularly difficult over the first year. As many of you know who've gone through a grieving process, holidays are hard. When you come on the anniversary of their death, it's hard. Certain particular events that were important to them are hard. And they get easier over time, but you'll find that the grief ebbs and flows, and that's fine. As long as you allow yourself to feel it, to embrace it, to let it kind of happen and wash over you, and then to let it go. And know that it's going to be a long-term process. It's not just a one and done or a two and done, you have a big cry and it's over. I think anybody that's experienced any kind of death knows that that's not the case at all, and that's okay too. I think another thing to do is to not get mired in some of the things that some people go through when they have complicated grieving, which is they blame themselves, they feel guilt about being alive. That happens. They feel overwhelming loneliness, and feeling loneliness when someone's gone is normal. But you have to find ways to kind of understand that that person is not here in the physical realm, but they're here maybe in another realm, in a spiritual realm, and that it's okay. You can keep talking to them. I always say you can keep the dialogue up after they're gone. But there is, of course, loneliness, but to not get mired down in that kind of deep sadness and deep loneliness, and the guilt also, the survivor's guilt that happens, I think can really eat you alive and lead to a really complicated process. And guilt over even things that were not said, the said and the unsaid. I think you have to really let go of that guilt. Again, you can continue the dialogue. You can't reverse time. That's not possible. Only Superman can do that when he goes around the world. I'm sorry, we can't do that. I wish we could sometimes. But you kind of have to live with what it is. And I think your core beliefs really play a part in how you grieve, and I really saw this in action. I think if you really believe what a lot of people say, that we are really spiritual beings on a human journey, and this is just part of you in your human form, and when you leave your human form, your spirit kind of moves on, and I think it's so evident. When you see the body after the spirit is left, it's nothing. It's a casing. That you really believe that this is just part of a longer process. I think it helps you to approach the grieving process differently. If you think that there's nothing after, that's got to be much harder. Or you're not sure what the after is. I think that's a more difficult concept to get around. Find ways to celebrate the person. I think that's the last thing, is always think of the good memories. You have tons of them in your heart and tons of them in your mind. And there's all different ways that you can really celebrate the life of that person, different rituals you can do, different things on different days that you can remember them. And I think those are also very personal. You can do those with other people, but you can also do those alone. And I think, again, it's a personal choice. But find ways to celebrate their lives ongoing, not just in the first year of their death and the second year after they die, but way after. You can find ways to really think about and celebrate that person. I think storytelling is really important in that. Always telling stories. As my grandmother was dying, I was telling my 7-year-old daughter stories about her when she was younger. And I think keeping up those stories about that person is what really keeps them alive in the hearts and minds of others, and that doesn't have to end. So wanted to do this video, given what I just went through on the grieving process. I think, we all do it. We've all been there, and we're all going to do it, and in different ways, in different places, in different times, and that's okay. Do it the way that you want and need to do it. I hope you've enjoyed this tip of the week, and I'll see you next week with another tip. You have a great week.